Hey there. Welcome back to Coco Mode 2.0. I'm Shauna Renee. Hope everybody's doing all right. I'm doing well. It is Halloween. I am here in the calm before the storm, if you will, in a few hours. There'll be tons of kids. We get so many trick-or-treaters in my neighborhood. There'll be tons of kids ringing the doorbell, knocking on the door, screaming, yelling, laughing, having a good time. So I thought this would be a great time before all of that to come and say hello and to check in, because it has been a while, I know, since we've had an opportunity to connect on this platform. And forgive me, it is only because I have been so incredibly busy with my 9 to 5. I am a full-time content creator, not necessarily social media content creator, but audio content creator. So I create about 25 hours of audio programming a week. So yeah, things can get a little busy. And then there are certain months throughout the year that also get really busy for me. And October is one of those, because October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. I'm sure you know that. You've probably seen the pink ribbons all around, and maybe you even participated in a walk or participated in a marathon in honor of someone that you know and love who has dealt with it, or maybe even in honor of yourself. There's a lot of work done during the month of October to raise awareness as well as money, because we are learning more and more. I say we like I'm a doctor, but I guess I'm part of the community. So yeah, we are learning more and more about this disease and the way it impacts women. I am always paying very close attention to the way that breast cancer impacts African American women, because we get it at higher rates and we die from it at higher rates. So it is very important for African American women to get their mammograms, their yearly mammograms, and to do their monthly self exams. That's one of the things I love about Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Now, there's some things that I'm on the fence about, but when it comes to spreading awareness and encouraging women to take their health into their own hands, I'm 100% for it. I support it. I'm here. There is, though, I think, one thing that these organizations fall short on, and that is providing support for people who are supporting those who have been diagnosed and are currently in treatment. I'm sure that there are platforms out there that spend time talking about it and offer up suggestions, but I don't see them as often as I would like, because I understand how important it is for people who are watching their loved ones go through this to feel like they can be of assistance. Helplessness is a very difficult feeling. So this week on Coco Mode 2.0, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to have a very pointed discussion about the ways that you can help someone who you love and care about that is either battling breast cancer, or maybe just at the very beginning of their journey, just newly diagnosed. There is no way that any one of us could have gotten through it or can get through it alone. But just having someone there, as important as it is not all that is necessary. We need people to show up in very specific ways. Now, let me bookmark real quick and say this. Just like everyone's battle is different, cancer shows up differently in every person. Breast cancer shows up differently in every woman, from one breast to another. There's so many different kinds. The treatments vary, and the needs of the patient vary depending not only on the way that the disease is progressing, but just who that person is in general, their lifestyle, the where they are in terms of like their family. Mothers with lots of children have a very different journey than perhaps a single woman who doesn't have a spouse or any children. And so you, as a friend or family member, you have to show up a little differently for people. So I am offering you just some suggestions based on my experience. When I was going through my healing journey, I was 37 years old at the time, so I was very young. I had a young son. My son was in elementary school at the time, and I was not married. So I was in a very difficult position. I just started a new job. I think I wasn't even really a year, I think, into my new job. So there were a lot of outside um, stressors, a lot of things that needed to be considered as I began developing my treatment plan. And I say, as I began to develop my treatment plan, and this is something else that one must consider, because I was not the kind of person who was just going to do whatever it was that the doctor told me to do. I knew from the very beginning that I was going to need a team of not only like surgeons and oncologists, but I knew I was going to need a homeopathic doctor. I knew I was going to need like a spiritual advisor. I knew that I was also going to have to rely on the information that I had at the time. When I was diagnosed, I had already gone through a program. So I was a certified holistic health counselor. I was a certified and registered yoga teacher. I had been practicing practicing meditation for a while. I'd studied Ayurveda. I'd studied the chakra system. I'd studied Chinese meridians. I knew a whole lot. Now, this was the first time in my life that I'd actually had to apply what I'd learned to my own life, outside of just everyday health and wellness maintenance. This was the first time that I had to take that and really create a plan, a strategy for survival. So I looked at my life a bit differently. My protocols were a bit different. And so that for me was the first step in trying to help those who wanted to help me, is getting them to understand, and I'm telling you this if you are someone who is supporting a person, that a patient, even in their lowest point, even when they're sad, even when they're afraid, they often know what is best for them. So you have to respect and trust and believe in the patient's ability and willingness to make the right decision for themselves. We are able to discern what is good for us. We can take all of the information that is presented to us, think about it, research a little more, pray on it, meditate on it, and then decide where to go from there. If ever we have any questions, if ever there are fears that come up that may create some doubt, most of us will go to the person that we trust and say, hey, what do you think about this? And that person may be a doctor. That person may be a pastor. That person may be some kind of a spiritual leader. But you just have to kind of step back, especially in the initial phases, and give that person some time to figure that all out. Even if they don't know exactly what to do, even if they don't have an actual strategy, they need a little bit of time to figure out what direction they're going to go in. So that's the first thing I would say is, and let's just put it simply, it's like, just give them space. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physical space unless it does. That's another thing to consider. Some people, after being diagnosed and during their treatment, need folks to just come and surround them and hold them up And some people just need time alone. Some people need to be alone with their thoughts. I was one of those people that I think I did better alone. I did better in the quiet moments than I did with a whole lot of people around me. So I know that during my entire treatment, like I would never see more than two people at a time. So, one person would come over and maybe sit with me for an hour or two, and that would really be all I needed for the day. And then maybe 2 or 3 days later, somebody would come. But these were people who never came unless I called for them. Or, they would check in, hey, how are you doing? And then, I'd be able to say, I'm okay, but, I'm kind of hungry, I'm thirsty. And then they would say, okay, well, boom, I'm going to stand in the gap, come in and provide you with whatever you need, which I think is something else to consider too. And that is never assuming what the person needs. Just ask. Ask, is there something that you need? Is there something specific? Because I think what a lot of folks try to do is when somebody that they love is dealing with a diagnosis, they do what everybody does, right? They start Googling away. How to cure breast cancer, how to treat breast cancer. And so they're reading all of these, studies and articles and things like that. And all of a sudden now they have all of this information and they're going to call and say, well, I was reading on WebMD that this is good and that is good, so I'm going to bring you this and I'm going to bring you that. And though I understand that people who do that are coming from a really a loving place, it's not always the best thing, because I guarantee you that the patient has probably also read those articles and those stories and has also been on WebMD probably more than you have or ever will be. So don't be afraid to ask what the person needs. And if you are able to provide that thing, then absolutely provide it. Give me a second. Where are my notes? I had some notes because I want to make sure that I get everything. So the first thing, like I said, is to be on call, right? Be available. On call means if they need you, you are there. And if they don't, that's okay. You don't have to show up. It's sometimes just good enough to know that somebody can be there when needed. There's this other thing too, I think a lot of people forget, and that is sometimes like just these mundane everyday activities can be very difficult. And I know one of the things that I really needed help with at the time was just keeping the house clean. Now, I could have easily hired someone to come in, but when you are in the midst of a battle, you are very cautious about the kinds of cleaning products that people use in your house, because so much of what we use is toxic. And so many of the chemicals in our everyday cleaning products are actually cancer causing chemicals and materials. So at that time, you're very sensitive to these kinds of things. So just hiring any old body, Mary Maids or whatever, to come into the house to clean up is a no-go. But I I never had the energy to actually do that work myself. So it was so helpful to have my friends come in and say, look, I'll wipe down the kitchen for you, I'll sweep, I'll dust, I'll vacuum, just minor stuff. I mean, nobody was here scrubbing toilets or anything like that. I would have never asked anyone to do that. But it was just those little mundane activities, going to the grocery store, picking up clothes from the cleaners, because I worked. And this is what a lot of folks too don't often realize and understand, that when you are in the midst of a crisis like that, some people like to just get under the covers and just sleep and just create a cocoon for themselves. And other people, and this is me, we need to keep going. We need something to keep our minds off of it. So I worked every single day throughout my treatment, with the exception of the recovery time for my surgeries. I had 3 surgeries. I had maybe about 3 or 4 days recovery from each surgery, and then I was back to work. And when I was doing my radiation treatments, I was getting up in the morning, taking my son to school, going to work, on my lunch hour, taking the train over to the hospital, getting my radiation treatments, taking the train back to work, finishing out my day, going to pick up my son, going home, uh, cooking dinner. And that was all that I could do. That was all that I could do. I couldn't even put my son like down to bed. And when I say like get him dinner, like I wasn't always cooking. To be honest with you, most times I wasn't. I was getting him McDonald's or, something out, or we were ordering in for pizza. Just because I did not have the energy to cook. So that takes me to the next way that you can be of assistance. And that is if your patient has children, support them in that way, or support the children. So I'm not even just talking about, oh, I'll come and play with the kids, or I'll come and cook for the kids, but maybe there are ways in which, especially if you know the children well, that you can actually sit with them for a little while and talk to them, give them some space, give them a safe place to express their emotions. Now, ideally, if your children are really having a difficult time with your diagnosis, you would put them into therapy. But again, sometimes you just don't have the energy to even get them there. So having someone who you trust and having someone that knows your children really well, who can, again, as I say, create a safe space for them to talk about their feelings is really helpful, because I find, and this was definitely the case with my son, that, he was very worried. And no matter how many times I told him, it's okay, everything is going to be okay, of course he was worried. But he didn't want me to see that he was worried. So he was holding a lot of those feelings and emotions in. And that's no good for him. It's no better for him than it was for me. So having people that he trusted around who would, take him out to the movies, or out to dinner, or just and just check in with him to see how he was doing, and also to reassure him, because sometimes you need to hear it, kids need to hear it from other people, just to reassure him that everything was going to be okay, made a huge difference. And I'll tell you, I was so proud of him, because during that year, that school year, so I was diagnosed in November. So it was really still toward the beginning of the school year. And I didn't really go into, remission, if you will, until about March or April. So he spent a good part of that school year dealing with this. And because he had a village around him, a community around him, he was able to thrive. The grades were great. He was doing well. He was playing sports. And I'm so thankful for that. So that is one of the very important ways that you can support a woman who is dealing with it. Also, for women who are married, if you are a woman supporting another woman and you happen to also be married to someone that knows this other woman's spouse, teaming up can be very helpful. Like, you deal with her, your hubby deals with his hubby, because I think, like children, husbands have a very difficult time, or spouses or partners have a really difficult time dealing when the person that they love more than anyone else in the world is sick. And this is especially true if the person who is sick is the person who takes care of the home, who is doing all of the work, who's doing the cooking, who's doing the cleaning, who's taking the kids here and there. Because a lot of times, you have folks who don't have to do those kinds of things. They don't always know how to do those things because they've never had to. Let's just keep it 100. Some people just don't want to do those things. And so they've never taken the time to learn. And so it can be especially stressful, because they are then thrown into having to take care of responsibilities that they haven't before, on top of the fact that they're worried about their spouses or their partner's health. And then you have the person who is sick, right, now feeling as if they have a responsibility to keep things going and manage the feelings and the emotions of everyone, because everyone's still looking to them to keep it all together. You know, mom is the glue. So even when mom is sick, there's still an expectation that mom is going to be the glue. And mom is the least stickiest that she could ever be. There is nothing sticky about mom at that time. She cannot be the glue, but yet we will still try. And that ends up making the situation worse. So yeah, I recommend that. And I only say this, I mean, anybody can support a spouse or a partner. I don't mean to say that only a man can support a man. I'm old school. And I believe that, women support women in very specific ways and men support men in very specific ways. So if you, as the person closest to the patient, can create a village of all kinds of different people, of your spouse, of your kids, of, neighbors and stuff, that always helps. That's always really helpful. I already said this, but this was number 4 on my list, so I'm going to go back to this. Respect the patient's wishes. Respect the patient's wishes. This was probably one of the biggest disappointments for me as I was dealing with my treatment. I made a decision very early on about what I was going to do. When the doctors laid out all of the possibilities for me, I was very clear about what I was going to do and what I was not going to do. And I was disappointed with some folks in my village who believed that my decisions were the wrong ones. And I'll be honest, if these people were doctors, maybe I would have been more open and willing to hear them out, but none of them were. Again, these were people who were on Google searching, looking, WebMD, who had heard my friend, my cousin, my uncle, my sister, they did this, they do that, they did. And, I'll never forget a friend of mine, when I told them that I was not going to do chemotherapy. Now, mind you, it hadn't even been put on the table. That wasn't even an option for me at that point. I just said, I'm not going to do it. If it is suggested, I'm not going to do it. But it had not been suggested. But anyhow, this person talked to a doctor or someone who said, "Oh, well, she's young. It's if she were my patient, I would just have her do chemotherapy no matter what." So this person comes to me and says, "I think you ought to do it." I said, "I'm not going to do it." Then they bring a few other people, and they had what I like to call a chemotherapy intervention, and I could not believe it. Just the complete disregard for my wishes hurt so bad that it was at that moment that I cut everyone who was on the phone that day completely off. You'll talk to me when this is over, but I have absolutely nothing else to say. And that was very stressful for me in the moment, because those were people who I thought that I could depend on. But when you realize that someone that you are looking to help you starts to hinder you because they don't respect you. They don't respect your discernment, your decision making. They don't respect even, what, like I said, even what your own doctors tell you, because at that time, my doctors hadn't even suggested chemotherapy. And it wasn't just chemotherapy. I had a very similar situation happen when I went to a doctor. Baby, let me tell you. I had doctors tell me to cut off both of my breasts. I had doctors tell me to get a complete hysterectomy. I even had a doctor suggest that I have a portion of my stomach taken out, because the type of breast cancer that I had often moves into the stomach. So if you take a portion of your stomach out, it'll eliminate the possibility of the cancer moving to your stomach. And I told all of them to go to hell. All of them, every single one of them. every single one of them, because I knew none of that was necessary. And I was right. So to hear someone try to convince me otherwise, who is not a doctor, when I told the doctor to go to hell. So what do you think I'm going to tell you, was so stressful. So please respect whatever decision the patient makes. After all, it is their life. They are the ones they're the ones who are going to have to deal with whatever. They're the ones that are going to have to get on, if surgery is what needs to happen, they're going to be on the operating table. They're going to be the ones sitting there with the radiation. They're going to be the ones dealing with chemotherapy. Your job is to support them in whatever decision that they make. If they come to you and say, hey, will you help me make this decision? Okay, that's something different. But I'm pretty sure unless you are a doctor, they're not going to do that. So respect their wishes. Okay? Just like, we talk a lot about, woman's body, woman's choice. That's not just, our reproductive organs. That can be our breasts as well. And then on the flip side, there are some women who decide to take a more aggressive approach. And you may be one of those people who's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't think you should do that. It doesn't matter what you think. If they want to go for the more aggressive approach, then that's on them. You should respect that. The other thing is, and this is, I think, the last point, because I'm going to try to keep this to under 30 minutes. Manage your own emotions. Manage your own emotions. I could not manage anyone else's emotions. And it was not fair for me to have to. And I felt a responsibility to do it, even though I could not. And this, I think, really applies more to family members maybe than friends, because sometimes friends can kind of create distance. Our friendships are such that we tend to create distance anyway. But like for family members, spouses, children, grandchildren, that kind of thing, parents, manage your own shit, please. It is not the responsibility of the person who is dealing with such a life-altering condition to have to make sure you feel okay, to check in with you and make sure everything is okay. A lot of us have that we have a propensity for drama. We do a lot of crying, and I've seen this crying and falling out and all that. That's not helpful. And if you're having a difficult time managing your emotions, because it can be very scary, then again, you need to find someone who can help you, preferably a therapist or some kind of a spiritual advisor, if that's the way that you'd rather go. But you definitely need to find someone who can help you with that. All right? So again, like I said, this is a really quick hit, but I just want to go over those 5 things with you again. The first one is be on call. If they need you, show up. If they don't, fall back. The second one is offer to help with like mundane tasks, day-to-day tasks, things that need to be done around the house. In the African American community especially, we're very familiar with this. Sort of what one does when when someone we love loses a family member, right? We all come, we cook, we show up, that kind of thing. Those things are needed. Help to look after the children and the partners, if only to get them out of the house so that the person can just spend some time alone. Let me tell you something. There was nothing like just having an empty house just so that I could cry and scream and throw things and not scare the badookie out of my child, because I was very angry. I was very, very angry after being diagnosed and coming to terms with exactly why I was in this situation. The other thing is, again, respect the patient's wishes, and then finally, manage your own emotions. All right. So, like I said, a very quick, pointed show. I'm not going to talk about much else. I will be back, but it is my sincere hope that if you are someone who is supporting a cancer patient, that this could be of some assistance. I am always available. You can leave a comment or a question in the comment section. I'll come back and answer it as best as I can. And listen, please, everybody, take care of your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health. It is all connected. Eat right, get some fresh air, sit in the sunshine, take your vitamins, eat your green leafy vegetables, laugh, make love, play with your children. I guarantee you, I know this for a fact, all of these things contribute to good health. Right? So with that, I'm gonna shut it down. Hey, about 31 minutes. I'm keeping time. I'm gonna go get this candy together so we can enjoy the festivities. And until next time, peace.